Overnight, his country already battered. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky saying Russia is planning new offensive operations. This coming just days before the historic summit in Alaska between President Trump and Vladimir Putin.
I'm going in to speak to Vladimir Putin, and I'm going to be telling him, you got to end this war. You got to end it.
But the president seeming to downplay expectations.
I'm here for one reason, to get rid of a war that somebody else started.
And after months of positive
Yeah, somebody else. Who's the somebody else? Not Vladimir Putin.
interactions, President Trump also seeming to once again blame Zelensky for the war Russia started.
I get along with Zelensky, but, I disagree with what he's done. Very, very severely disagree. This is a war that should have never happened.
But 3 years after the Russian invasion,
Erdogan trying to steal Trump's deals. Erdogan proposes hosting Russia-Ukraine summit. Oh my God. My goat, dude. My goat. He's the table. He wants to be the table so bad. He's like, bro, come on. I'm right here.
this is the Ukrainian land the Russians now control. Is this what President Trump is talking about when he suggests Russia and Ukraine could swap land, something Zelensky has said he would not approve on his own?
I was a little bothered by the fact that Zelensky was saying, well, I have to get constitutional approval. I mean, he's got approval to go into war and kill everybody, but he needs approval to do a land swap because there'll be some land.
Yeah, who could forget when Zelensky invaded Russia? February 2022. Zelensky said, I got congressional approval. We're invading Moscow. Bro, what do you mean? God, I can't even fucking make fun of Zelensky. I want to, but I can't because this motherfucker's so crazy. Okay? It's just like, it's so stupid. Zelensky got invaded. Zelensky got invaded without congressional approval. No congressional approval then. What now?
Swapping going on.
Zelensky says Russia is trying to deceive the U.S. and is calling for tougher sanctions. Neither Zelensky nor European leaders have been invited to this week's summit.
If it's a fair deal, I'll reveal it to the European Union leaders and to the NATO leaders and also to President Zelensky. I think out of respect, I'll call him first.
President Trump also saying he hopes in the future all three of the presidents can meet, but that would very much depend on what happens at this summit on Friday. Michael?
Yeah, we will see what happens, Martha. Thank you.
In the last 48 hours, it's become fairly clear that the Russians have launched a surprise offensive in the Donbass area, mainly between Pokrovsk and Kramatorsk, and they've had some success. They seem to have advanced on 2 or 3 fronts by about 15 or 20 kilometres, which is quite a long way in terms of the present war. Undoubtedly, what they're trying to do is to change the facts on the ground between now and the weekend when this summit takes place between President Trump and Putin in Alaska. And changing the facts on the ground, of course, is all about maybe swapping territories or...
The Ukrainian front line is collapsing in that part, yes. I mean, it's the most predictable outcome that I said was inevitable, even though people keep fucking yelling at me whenever I bring this up, because they don't have manpower. That's it. That's why there's only 2 options out of this. If you want Ukraine to continue the fight without a reasonable managed negotiation for a ceasefire, you have to literally deport every Ukrainian man in the Western world, whether it be from Poland or any number of different Western countries, the United States of America, back to Ukraine so they get forcibly conscripted to go into battle. You have to train them. There is a runway for this. It's not going to be easy. That is the only possible way that you can make up for the lack of manpower. Even if you send all the weapons, it doesn't matter. Or you can lower the age of conscription in Ukraine and forcibly draft younger and younger Ukrainians, which of course cooks the next generation of Ukraine as a nation state until there's nothing left to defend. You want to kill more Ukrainians? Did I say that this was the right thing to do? No, I didn't say that. I don't think it's the right thing to do. It's the only option. If there's two things that you can do here. Either you just cave to Vladimir Putin's ridiculous fucking demands and try to manage that negotiations process, not by undermining Ukraine, but by establishing some semblance of sovereignty for Ukraine, so that all is not lost, which is Trump is not doing that anyway. He's literally fucking farming what remains of Ukrainian natural resources and doing like a minerals deal while simultaneously offering Ukrainian territory to Russia and like a legal recognition, or at least like a de facto recognition of annexed territory already. You should have an expert on war fighting in Ukraine and enlistment requirements rather than just say shit. Can you have some expert on the war rather than just your knee-jerk reaction? I mean, sure. If you have any expertise, if you have any experts that you think I should talk to, great. I'm down to listen. Having said that, I do fucking read the experts in war fighting, and their analysis has been incorrect. My knee-jerk reaction, which is what I've been at, that ultimately, in terms of just like the meat grinder that Eastern Ukrainian territory looks like, Russia has the capacity to send more manpower, even with like diminished weapons. Like one of the things that I saw that I read from frontline Ukrainian soldiers, like one of the reports that I read that stuck with me was a Ukrainian troop position in Eastern Ukraine. I forget exactly where it was. There was this guy that was talking about how like even if there is one Russian soldier with a busted ass, like old ass, dusty ass AK-47, okay, positioned in a fucking building, that still requires a tremendous amount of manpower and a tremendous amount of resources to successfully fucking remove from that position. So like the problem is there are a fuck ton of Russian soldiers. There are just more Russian soldiers than there are Ukrainian soldiers. So even if they don't have the best gear, even one person can hold an area for an extended period of time, and it makes the operations infinitely more complicated, okay? It's a war of attrition, and the side that has more people to throw at the problem is obviously the side that has a larger economy that is capable of withstanding this war of attrition is going to inevitably win. Ukrainian here, if the U.S. and other Western countries allowed Ukraine to use their weapons all the way, including on Russian territory, and did not undermine our counteroffensive in 2022, we would be having a very different conversation. Maybe, but that's not where we're at anymore. I think the best possible solution in this circumstance was when Ukraine had the maximum amount of leverage after they were able to withstand the Kiev offensive. But ultimately, right now, what we have in front of us is a smaller country, Ukraine, completely incapable of withstanding further Russian offenses. Their positions are dug in eastern Ukraine, and they're slated to take violently more territory. So for that reason, if you want a real solution to this conflict, if you want to end the additional bloodshed in this circumstance, either you have to disband NATO so that like European militaries can operate without Article 5, which is not going to happen, or forcibly send Ukrainian refugees that currently live in the Western world back to Ukraine to be conscripted, to get trained, and then to be sent to the front lines with weapons in their hands, with an additional push of weapons, which, by the way, is not a guarantee that it's going to succeed. Or in terms of what to do, considering that Russia is a foreign adversary, and people say, can't you say the same thing about Palestine? Great question. There's a difference. We are the belligerent in Palestine, okay? We are the party that is allowing our extension to continue doing a genocide, which is, again, different than a war, against a captive population of Palestinians, okay? We are the belligerents. We have maximum control. We could literally make Israel stop tomorrow if we wanted to. We can't make Russia stop if we don't have the same amount of power over Russia. I think the best implementation here would be to try and bring China to the table, considering that they are a political backer of Russia at this point, and to have a conversation with China, Russia, the United States, the EU, and Ukraine to come together and create a reasonable solution that does not completely write off the Ukrainians from the equation. Does Ukraine have nukes? No, they gave up the nukes, and that's why they're currently getting fucking destroyed.
A territorial transfer ahead of some sort of ceasefire. So what might that transfer look like? If there is going to be some sort of territorial transfer, I'm pretty skeptical myself, but this may be what we're talking about. There are 4 areas to think about. One of them is Crimea. Crimea is really important. The Russians will not give up Crimea. The Ukrainians are in no position to take it back anytime soon. So although Crimea is very important legally and militarily, it's off the table as far as present negotiations go. A second area.
Remember when I said this and everybody fucking yelled at me? Well, 3 years in the future, now you got fucking traditional mainstream outlets saying it too. They got there. This is still something that people fucking point to. They'll be like, dude, I can't believe you said that. You love Russia. You're pro-Russia. You want Russia to fucking take over the entirety of Ukraine.
Would be the marginal areas up in Sumy and Kharkiv. The Russians...
No, you were saying Crimea is closer to Mongolia than Ukraine. That's what you get yelled at for? Wait, what? Crimea is closer to Mongolia than Ukraine? No, I jokingly said Crimea is first and foremost Ottoman territory because it's supposed to belong to the ethnic group, the Tatars. What? That's not my serious assessment. Obviously, that's a joke.
To the Kursk offensive, hold a little bit of Ukrainian territory opposite Sumy, a little bit of territory in Kharkiv. They might agree to withdraw from those territories. It doesn't cost them anything to do that, and it would be a certain amount of withdrawal which the Ukrainians could talk about. That would be a second area, reasonably easy to negotiate. Third area, much more difficult to negotiate, is the Donbass. The Russians say they want the whole of the Donbass as a first step. Well, they hold most of Luhansk, which is one part of it. They hold about 3/4 of Donetsk, but they don't hold the other quarter, which is the bit that the Ukrainians have fought so hard for, really since 2014, not just since 2022. And the Russians are saying they want the whole of the Donbass. And in that area...
Of course, as a non-starter for Zelensky, who says, I am not going to surrender my country because I have no right to do so. Zelensky said, if we leave Donbass today, our fortifications, our terrain, the heights we control, we will clearly open a bridgehead for the preparation of a Russian offensive. You said appeasement over and over again? Yeah, no. From the river to the sea, except not for Ukraine. Why? What am I missing? By this logic, Palestine should give Gaza City. Dog, I'm an American, okay? Do you understand? I am an American citizen, okay? I am an American. As an American, we have... technically, theoretically, some kind of say over what America says and does around the world. And as an American, I'm telling you that Israel would not be able to genocide the Palestinian people without America's go-ahead. Russia is a foreign nation, a kleptocracy, which with American intervention initially in the dissolution of the USSR that became what it is now, but it's a right-wing authoritarian kleptocracy that is held together by a bunch of fucking former KGB oligarchs that took all of the state enterprises and turned them into their own fucking unlimited money faucets. Okay? We, as Americans, do not have the same level of control over what Russia does. Russia's incursion into Ukraine is unjustifiable, immoral, incredibly violent. Okay? Its invasion is completely unacceptable. No one is disagreeing on this. I'm not disagreeing on this. I've never fucking said it was good. Do you understand? I'm simply looking at the situation right now in front of us. If you think this is, if you want my moral opinion, okay, my moral opinion, yeah, of course Ukraine should be fucking free of Russian incursion. Yes, I agree. What do you mean? Of course. But that's not what we're having a conversation around. Russia is not Israel. Israel, well, a lot of Russians in Israel, but Russia is not Israel, okay? Israel is a extension of the United States of America. Israel cannot exist in the violent, belligerent ways that it does without America's go-ahead, without America's unlimited support, okay? That's it. We don't have the same level, we do not have the same level of control over Russia as a foreign adversary as we do over Israel. That's the major difference. We have the same level of control over Ukraine that we have over Israel, but Ukraine is the wronged party here. So obviously, it doesn't fucking matter. Do you understand? And Trump is using the level of control that we have over Ukraine to fuck over Ukraine. It's not that complicated. If we leave Donbass today, our fortifications, our terrain, the heights we control, we will clearly open a bridgehead. Which, by the way, I don't even think this is a false assessment.
There are the four big cities, Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Kostiantynivka, Druzhkivka, and those are the fortress cities. They're like a very strong line of defenses. And the Ukrainians will be required to give up those strong line of defenses and let the Russians in. And west of that, it's harder to construct defenses. So that's a third area, very, very sensitive.
Yeah, while we're having this conversation, in recent days, Russia's troops broke through a segment of Ukraine's defensive line near the city of Pokrovsk, a longtime stronghold. They advanced several miles into Ukrainian-held territory, threatening to outflank Ukraine's positions. I want to point to something here, okay? This article is from the New York Times. And in the past, the New York Times' assessment of what was going on in Ukraine was infinitely more cheery. So the very fact that they're actually changing their discourse on Russia's advancements into Ukraine implies that they are getting their notes once again from the American State Department, and the American State Department's assessment, possibly led by Donald Trump, possibly led by the conditions on the battleground, are now different than the way that the Joe Biden administration presented the situation. Obviously, circumstances were also different as well. There was at least there was, I guess, by their own version of events, they thought that Ukraine could put up a stronger fight. They thought that Ukraine could potentially push back Russian forces from eastern Ukraine. They were wrong. But the very fact that this is coming from the New York Times means that the American State Department has also changed their dynamic, also changed the way they are looking at the situation. Okay? That's it. When this is a reflection, in my opinion, this is a reflection of the State Department's attitude. Part of that is due to Donald Trump. I mean, this next incursion further into Ukrainian territory is only made possible by Donald Trump routinely going back and forth and undermining the Ukrainian positions, for sure. I'm sure that played a role on this. But the major reason here is because Ukraine is running out of manpower. This is not my assessment. I don't know. I don't know what the front lines look like. This is just the assessment that I keep reading from experts. Having said that, do I believe Russia has the capacity to militarily occupy eastern Ukraine permanently? I do not, for the record. I don't. I don't think that they have that capacity. So this will cook Russia in the long run, is what I think. Okay, there will be covert operations. There will still be guerrilla warfare. I'm certain that there will always be Ukrainian resistance in these areas against the newfound Russian annexation. It's going to be incredibly difficult for Russia to hold the eastern Ukrainian territory. But that's for the future. For the time being, it doesn't seem like this can continue as like state versus state warfare. It's crazy because a lot of people would see Israeli annex of Gaza with full rights for Palestinians as a much better situation. Israel isn't just grabbing Gaza for land. They want the Palestinians dead completely and pushed out. They want the land with no Palestinians on it. I don't want to make that comparison. You're not wrong to make that. You're not wrong for that statement, but if I make that comparison, everyone's going to fucking freak out on me, okay? Because Russia's invasion of Ukraine is completely and utterly unjustifiable. But yes, that is the major difference. Israelis will not offer any fucking citizenship, even with like complete re-education and whatnot, and ethnic domination over the out group. They will not offer any citizenship whatsoever to the Palestinians. They literally want to eradicate the Palestinians. That's the major difference between what Russia is doing, which is military occupation and making that quote unquote a part of Russia and all the citizens a part of Russia as well, which is again completely unjustifiable. But there are differences between what Russia is doing in that regard as opposed to what Israel is doing to the Palestinians, because Israel does not want Palestinians there. Israel does not want to give Palestinians citizenship. Russian forces are striving to shape the battlefield to their advantage for a high-stakes summit between President Trump and Vladimir Putin, making a swift advance in eastern Ukraine after months of grinding battle. In recent days, Russian troops broke through a segment of Ukraine's defensive line near the city of Pokrovsk, a longtime stronghold. They have advanced several miles into Ukrainian-held territory, threatening to outflank Ukraine's positions. The situation is quite chaotic, as the enemy, having found gaps in their defense, is infiltrating deep inside, trying to quickly establish a foothold and accumulate forces for further advancement. Advancement said Deep State, a Ukrainian group with ties to the military that maps the battlefield. President Zelensky of Ukraine said in his evening address on Monday that the Russians are redeploying their troops and forces in ways that suggest preparations for new offensive operations, and that they are not preparing for a ceasefire or an end to the war. Or this could be seen as a last-ditch attempt to conquer additional territory so that there's a stronger foothold to stand on for Vladimir Putin when he goes back to the ceasefire negotiations process with Donald Trump and say, see, we took these areas, we could take even more areas, so now you have to give us those areas, which I understand is a non-starter. That makes no fucking sense. The idea that like Russia would take over areas as well that they haven't even militarily occupied is completely fucking ridiculous. Ukraine too is seeking an edge before the Russian-American peace talks on Friday in Alaska. Kyiv has ramped up attacks on Russian oil refineries, doubling down on a strategy of pressuring Russia into making concessions during negotiations by targeting the Kremlin's main revenue source to fund the war. Pressing their advance as peace talks gather pace has been a recurring tactic of both sides throughout the current war and the one that preceded it starting in 2014. Ukraine's bold June drone attacks deep inside of Russia, which destroyed many strategic bombers, came just a day before negotiations in Istanbul. In 2015, Russia intensified fighting during ceasefire talks surrounding the eastern town of Debaltseve to force political concessions from Kyiv. Russia's recent push near Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region, Oblast, sends a stark warning that Moscow's forces remain capable of making rapid gains on the battlefield. It comes as Mr. Putin is expected to present Mr. Trump with major demands during Friday's talks, which could include an insistence that Ukraine cede part of the Donetsk region that Kyiv still holds. Pokrovsk, which was once a critical logistical hub for Ukrainian forces in the east, is now semi-encircled from the northeast to the southwest. Ukrainian troops must pass through a narrow 10-mile corridor to enter the city, leaving them vulnerable to drone attacks. Russian forces are likely to try and tighten their noose around the city to force Ukrainian troops to withdraw, a tactic they have successfully used to capture other cities. Pasi Peronen, an analyst for the Finland-based Blackbird Group, which tracks battlefield movements, said Russian forces have quickly infiltrated Ukrainian lines at a depth of roughly 10 miles in the past 3 days, a contrast of Russia's usual slow grind. The next 24 to 48 hours will likely be crucial in whether the Ukrainian army can contain the push, Mr. Peronian wrote on X. Even as both sides keep fighting, they have tried to show Mr. Trump, who has long condemned the war as a costly waste of lives and resources, that they remain committed to pursuing peace. After Russia increased drone attacks on Ukrainian cities during talks last month between Moscow and Washington, Mr. Trump's typically lenient tone towards Mr. Putin soured noticeably. He talks nice and then he bombs everybody in the evening, Mr. Trump said over Mr. Putin. So there's a little bit of problem there. I don't like it. Just a little bit of a problem. I'd be very surprised if we get any sort of ceasefire out of this. Putin needs this for his ego and he won't agree to anything other than his ultimatum. I think you have to grease his wheels. And I don't know how much, basically, in order, there are people who say this doesn't mean a ceasefire will be abided by, right? There are people who say, how can you trust Russia? I don't. It's simple. I don't. Okay. That's it. Just like I didn't trust Israel to abide by a ceasefire. And I was right. Okay. So the goal of a real solution to this conflict is supposed to revolve around making it so that it is less costly to pursue the path of peace for Vladimir Putin in order to preserve his, in order to basically throw some red meat his way to make it seem like he got a tremendous victory over this, okay? While simultaneously making it so that it's more costly to continue pursuing further land grabs and further land incursions. That's it.